Hi, and welcome to Parent Cafe Live. I hope you're all doing well this week and enjoying the beautiful weather and being allowed to have a little more freedoms as we have some of the restrictions lifted on social distancing and being able to see our loved ones and kind of get in the swing of things again. I know a lot's up in the air with school, and school's almost out for the year, so hang in there. We're almost there. So as I have been home with my child more and more, we are seeing more and more misbehaviors. Not because he's doing them more often necessarily, it's just because we're with him more. So we felt really exhausted in our efforts to correct those behaviors. And I felt like it wasn't effective, and I just felt like a bad guy. Like, I don't like feeling like I'm constantly nagging and constantly just kind of disciplining, you know? So I decided I was going to research some better ways to do it. So that brings us to the topic for this week. So I'll be talking about natural and logical consequences. And I mean, I've always known these, but I feel like with everything, we always need a refresher. And since they're really effective and I want to use them more, especially now that he is more verbal and he is just pushing more and more and more boundaries, I really need to be firmer in those boundaries, but still give him love, respect, empathy, and be that trusted adult to him without him feeling like I'm just like this harsh disciplinarian. So it's just not because I'm not going to continue to be firm, but I don't want our relationship to be so strained or feel strained, and I don't like feeling gross all the time. And this is hard, and a lot of tools and skills I have to practice in order to make them be effective as far as the natural and logical consequences go. But I think the payoff is really better, because you still have to repeat them, especially our younger kids do need repetition in order to learn something. But they learn to not want to misbehave because of the consequence of the behavior versus just making you upset. So I feel like it's just more ingrained, and it helps them make better decisions, and it creates better decision like problem solving and decision making skills. So that's why I really like this model. Some of it was kind of weird when I was reading it, so I'm gonna do my best to kind of explain that to you guys, so that you know that, you know, discipline or punishment, I mean, really you're letting the same things happen when you're using natural consequences. You're just not letting it seem like it's you and you're threatening and nagging as much. So it's just kind of being smarter about how you interact with your child and try to guide better behaviors. So for me, this is really helpful. And I wrote notes so that I can like look at them every night and make sure I'm doing this right, because this is new and it's hard. And you know, I grew up in more of like a discipline punishment system, which is really effective, and that's how like my parents were parented. And I was reading this article on parenting and how times are changing, so that way of parenting is no longer working for our kids, especially as they grow up and they are just so smart, so young, and they know kind of how to manipulate and navigate the world. And so we kind of have to school ourselves and, you know, get ahead of the game. And so I feel like this is a really good way to do it, and in the long run be less exhaustive on yourself emotionally and yourself as far as your relationship with your child. So natural consequences are something that happens due directly to the choice they've made. So if you know the weather's bad and you're like, hey Johnny, please grab your coat before you go to school, you need that, and they don't rush to school to bring them their coat when that storm starts. They need to deal with either not getting to go outside and play, or they're gonna be cold. If, you know, there's somebody who's gonna be walking home in like 30 below temperatures, obviously you wouldn't want to do that. But you're going to weigh those things pretty heavily when we're looking at this, because like risk of harm and safety is always going to be where we have to create the logical consequence. So maybe it is you bring home a coat or you bring a coat that they hate. So they have to wear something that's warm and functional and all of that, but it's not pretty, or something they don't deem pretty. So that would be where we would need to step in and create a logical consequence, instead of just letting the natural consequence happen. We have to kind of alter that a little bit. Natural consequences are really important. So like I said, if there's a safety issue, we need to step in. But if there's not, we can let them happen. It is really hard for us as parents not to step in and try to save our children from pain and discomfort. So that's where this gets hard. You kind of just got to let things happen and then explain to them why those are happening without blame, disrespect, you know, just simply stating the facts that really make it impersonal. Like, well, you know, when we don't have our coats, we do get cold, and, you know, that really stinks and I feel sorry for you. Or, you know, I only have time to grab this one and you're just going to have to make do. It sucks, and usually they might, with something like that, they might get a little frustrated at you, but ultimately I guarantee they're gonna remember their coat, or it might take a few times, but they're either gonna suck it up worse and not ask you to bring them a warm coat because they'd rather just be cold, or they'll find out other ways to get home. So with a logical consequence is something that we create, and there's some rules behind those to make sure that they are effective and that they are a consequence versus a punishment. And as I was reading through some of this, I felt like it was doing the same thing. It wasn't really like punishment to me. But the biggest difference is the way we approach it. So our words, our tone, the way we portray ourselves. So again, making it impersonal, like we're not blaming, we're just stating the facts. Like, well, this was done and this is what has to happen now. So as I go through, I'll give some more examples, and if you guys ever have questions, please put them in. So natural consequences really are because of their choices or their actions are the child's responsibility. They've taken on that responsibility and now they have a consequence, and not the consequence isn't administered by the parent, although we do let them happen. So with a logical consequence, and sorry, my dog is hanging out with me, is the result of the child's action, but we do impose that consequence. It might be because letting the natural consequence was a safety thing. It might be because we feel that they need a better lesson, or their choice, whatever they choose is, you know, not the right choice, and there needs to be something for that. So like if they leave their toys out or their Game Boy out, or, you know, whatever gaming system, or they leave their phone or something, that can be taken away from them because it's our problem. They've created a problem for us, and something needs to happen in order to correct that problem. So maybe we put it up and they don't have access to it. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Logical consequences have to be logical, so they have to distinctly relate to the misbehavior, and the consequence needs to fit the crime. It needs to be present. It needs to be, you know, just because they rode their bike and went across the street like they weren't supposed to, it doesn't mean that they never get to ride their bike again. They just maybe have a limit on it, or where they can go or something. If they don't wear their helmet and they're supposed to, they're not ready for that responsibility, so they need a few days to get ready and learn why. If they leave something out that could be like mowed, you know, they have the choice to go pick it up, and if they don't, then that gets taken away and put up so that we don't have to worry about mowing over it again. We're putting it up out of the way, and it doesn't mean they're being punished. It's just the consequence that they didn't choose to do it. Like the spot we know where it goes versus where they would put it. So hopefully they don't see that it's actually a punishment, because you're just being really impersonal and factual and just saying, okay, well, that's your choice. I'm gonna do this now and love you, and you carry on with your stuff, versus yelling at them and threatening them and trying to get them to do what you want. So me trying to get my son to do what I want is the most epic battle of wills ever, and that's why I wanted to look at a more effective way to do this, because I don't like that I let him get me that riled up. I don't like that my response to him is more of a, like, I can't believe he's not listening to me, how dare he? And he's really struggling with the same thing. Why isn't she listening to me? So this way I feel like really helps you listen, and you're showing empathy, and like if they have concerns, I understand that. And you get the chance to kind of explain why those things happen, and you can give examples of, you know, if you were to do the same thing, you would have the same consequences. Your kids might get smart and say that you have some consequences for things. That's how my kid is, so I'm preparing myself for that. So when you're using natural and or logical consequences, you need to do some things, consider some things before you implement them. So you need to identify the reasons for the behavior. The reason you need to do that is because it helps you determine if there was a natural consequence and how you're going to respond to that. And then if you need to do something with a logical consequence. And I feel like there's other things that might need to happen in place of that. Like your child might need some more supports. You might need to know more of the story. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's just better for us to think and identify before we react and respond, especially with big things, right? Some of these things can happen pretty quickly based on it, but as our kids get bigger, these things are bigger. Like if they are getting in fights at school or something like that, you're not going to want to respond right away. Then you need to decide whose problem it is. So whether it's their problem or your problem. So if it's their problem, you let the natural consequences happen. Again, if there's a safety thing or something, you might have to navigate that consequence a little bit. They did something and then there's a consequence for it. Like they slept in, they turned off their alarm snooze, now they don't have a ride to school. So either they miss school or they find a way to get there. Again, really hard to do. But if it's your problem, like their stuff's all on the floor and you're tired of picking it up and you just don't like seeing it, that becomes your problem. So you get to make the consequences for that. And if they are logical, they will feel natural. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I am wrapping all this around in my brain. You can offer a choice. So if they've already misbehaved, you can offer them a choice to continue doing what they're doing and this is what will happen, or they can do what you've asked. And that goes for like giving them choices of something that is your problem. So you don't like all those things on the floor. Okay, well, we can leave them and I will pick them up and then you won't see them till Saturday. Versus, well, you could pick them up and then you know where they're at and we don't have any issues. So I was reading this thing about a Saturday box. So each night this parent picks up everything around the house, and if it's like a gaming system or a phone or anything like that, the kid doesn't have it until the weekend, when the weekend's like almost over. So I think that's a pretty fair consequence if you can't take responsibility for your own things. So as our kids grow, like, they need to learn to respect and be responsible for their items. If they can't, there's consequences to that. There is an adult life, and we can't be there to protect our kids all the time. So setting these examples for them now is really going to be beneficial for them. And that is so hard to remember, but that's why we're doing these things. And I'm telling you, parenting is the hardest thing I've ever done. When you offer them a choice, make sure it's something you can live with, because you're the one that has to stay firm and can make sure it's followed through and make sure it's safe. The next one's standing firm. So I've already said that. If you get like a negative feedback because of it, you still have to follow through with it. So kids will often respond negatively. Like, my 4-year-old will throw tantrums, and that's okay. That's still what we're gonna do, right? I could rise and escalate with him, or I can just stand firm. And my hope is that eventually, like every book I've ever read says, he will start to follow suit and realize that he's not going to get his way with that behavior, because he's going to push boundaries, because, you know, he thinks that that's the way he's going to get away with it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and he's just growing so much right now, and I understand that. And his brain has limitations. So it's my job to stay calm and keep approaching it. And the tantrums last way less longer than they did, you know, a year ago. But he still throws them from time to time, especially when he goes bounces back and forth between who's taking care of him. So, like, I had to stay home today with him, and he just wanted to push a new set of boundaries with me. Which is so hard, because, you know, you just love your kids so much. And when you're at odds like that with each other most of the day, I practiced these natural consequences, and I have been. Today's just the first day I've had him at home by myself when I've been really putting these into effect. And I felt better, which is a huge thing. So the next thing is talking to your child about choices in a positive way. An authoritative presence, it's going to get a different response, even if the meat of what we're saying is exactly the same thing. It's just how we present it to them. So they're more likely to be like, oh, well, that's okay, I'll go do that, because that seems like the better option, versus getting that negative feedback of instantly feeling like they've disappointed or taking it personally and self-criticizing. And I mean, there's a whole lot of options that could go, but you're getting a negative response back because the culture in the room and the environment is turned into one of punishment and negativity. So I know how I behave controls a lot of my interaction with my child. With that said, I still lose my temper. With that said, I still yell sometimes. With that said, I threaten. With that, I've bribed. With that, I've just sat down and let him run amok because I was too tired to do anything else. So when I'm telling you guys these things, please don't be hard on yourself. As I'm saying these and I know these, I write notes down so that I can keep practicing them. I know a lot about parenting, but the practice of parenting versus the lecture, the teaching, and all of that is so different. And each of our kids are so different. Every situation is different. I would guarantee that anybody with a PhD and writes all this stuff has had bad parenting moments. Like, we're human, and that is okay. It's just like, we don't want them to feel like they're a bad human for misbehaviors. We are not a bad parent because we misbehave as a parent. We are a human that makes mistakes, and we have the ability as an adult to really look at that and focus and reflect and choose and make choices to to be better. And so if we're not doing that, how can we expect our kids to do that? And I have to remind myself that like 10 times a day, because my child is probably no worse than any other, but his and my personalities are so conflicting. Like, sweetest boy, but strongest will. And it is so hard. And I don't know, maybe because I'm an older parent, it makes it harder. I don't know. I just know I struggle on a daily basis, and I love my child. Like, I would die for him. I would do anything for him. Like, he is the world to me. It doesn't make the everyday moments of trying to teach him to be a good human any easier, to keep him safe any easier. He is full of life. Like, every kid gets into things, and all I want him to do is to be safe and be happy and healthy. And so all of that emotion goes into things, and it's hard to be in control all the time. And that's our job, to guide, to coach, to be the role model. And so as I'm teaching him, I'm teaching myself too. And that's really the most we can ask of ourselves, is just to try to do better if we don't do great. If we do everything with love, it makes a huge difference. So don't be hard on yourselves. Bear with me. We're going to get through this, and it's just more food for thought. I hope that this helps you, because it's helping me immensely. Let your child know when they have done something good. We all love to know when we've hit the bar, when we've hit that bar of expectation, when we've, made somebody happy, we've completed our goal, we've, great job. Thank you so much for picking up your toys. I really appreciate that. Now you're going to be able to, play with them, and that's awesome. If possible, let your child help set the consequences. So if they're able to have a conversation with you, often they're more likely to buy in. So how many of us work and we're like, we were voluntold to do this. In life as adults, you're often voluntold. And how likely are we to really want to do that versus when we volunteer to do it? So if we volunteer to do something and it's part of a choice we've made, we will accept any of the good, the bad, the ugly that comes with that a lot easier. We also want to do it, and we want to do it better. So that's helpful too. We give more of ourselves to that commitment. So with that, as we're deciding if we want natural consequences and or logical consequences, because you're always going to have that natural consequence, but if there's safety things, you're going to step in and do that. So these are when we let natural consequences happen. So trouble at school. So if they're fighting or anything and they get detention, they skip in class, they get suspended, like, we want to protect our child. We need to know the whole story and make sure that there is some fair treatment there. But those things happen for a reason. We need to let our child be accountable for what they're doing. We believe our children are beautiful and wonderful, but they're humans, and sometimes they make bad choices and aren't kind people, So we need to let the school handle that. We still need to be involved. If it's grades and things like that, again, along with school, we can't do their homework for them, right? We need to know what's going on and help set those expectations and set their time for homework and things, but we can't hover over them. We can teach them, especially as younger, like, to instill that learning can be fun, and this is, what we do, and we all have jobs, and it's really important. It makes it easier as they get older to set those good, like, study habits and things like that, reading habits. But as they become more independent, sometimes we're not around all of the time. I'm sure a lot of you work when your child is supposed to be doing homework, and so you guys can have family time, or they have sports, and life just gets busy. So keeping an open conversation about that with them is going to be important, and checking in with them, but you have to trust them at their word that they've done that, and been doing, and they're telling you everything that they're supposed to be doing, because they might not show you all their homework. With Power School, which is the tool our school district uses to communicate, and I believe like their homework and stuff's on there, you can see a lot and track a lot. So just make sure you are aware of what's actually going on in the school, but your child does need to be accountable, and teaching them how to be accountable is really important. They need to be responsible for their personal space and belongings, so that's great for natural consequences. If a toy gets broken because they left it out and the dog chewed it up, which happens all the time in my house, sorry, you don't get a new one. I've told you to pick those toys up. I try not to let the dog do it, but she's a puppy and that's what happens sometimes. Another thing is not completing household chores. Well, you don't know how, you're not ready for the responsibility of this. So with that responsibility comes this benefit, so you can't have that benefit until you're ready again. So let's try it again in 2 days. Like feeding the dog is a chore my kid has, so he might not get to play with the dog for a couple of days if he doesn't do that responsibility. So it's really hard to find things that meet it, because my dog really benefits from having that playtime with my child. So then I have to live with that and step in to make sure she's having her needs met as well. I already talked about bad grades. Bad behaviors outside of the home. So I have been talking about behaviors inside the home a lot, but what happens when they go to somebody else's house and they misbehave? They might not be able to go back for a while or ever, you know? So those are really important. If they shoplift, they might not be welcome back at a shopping center or things like that. So what else can you do? And with things like that, you probably need to also have some logical consequences that go with those as well. So they must be related to the misbehavior. So making sure that it fits the situation. So toys misplaced don't equal not getting to go to the movies or something 3 days from now. It needs to be in the moment. If they can't make it home on time, then they can't, be allowed to go and leave the house for like a week, because they don't understand the responsibility of time management and blah, 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 right? So that would make sense. They need to be non-judgmental. So I've kept saying make it impersonal and focus on the facts. So like, let's say your child broke something of yours. So, hey, Mom, I was playing with your cell phone and I dropped it and I broke it, and I know you said I could use it, but to be careful. I'm sorry. Okay, so our response most likely would be upset. But with that aside, okay, well, the fact is, thanks for telling me. That's unfortunate that you broke it. So what are we going to do for you to replace it? That's a natural consequence. Like, you don't take responsibility. You have to take responsibility for things that are, especially if they're not yours, to replace them. And if they are yours, like, you don't get a phone until you replace it. But they have to work that off and help you get a new one or fix it. And age appropriateness is going to help you determine what that continues to look like. When we use like punishment and judgment, we can imply wrongdoing, personal deficiencies, which don't help our kids at all to feel that. Versus it's probably a mistake or misbehavior. So a misbehavior is a mistake. It's a bad choice. So they haven't learned to not make that yet. So we have to help guide that learning process as to why they should choose something different. And through reflection and talking, they will learn that and the consequences. Versus if we use negative judgment and authoritative and anger and all those things, we're teaching them something different than what we wanted to. And again, so hard to remember. And I've only been doing this for 4.5 years, you guys. So please, 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 please know that this is all food for thought. And if you really want to do it, you'll practice it and you'll try it and see if it works for you. It needs to be related to the current or future behavior in order to, okay, I made a note and I needed to figure out what it meant. So in order to continue the benefit of something, so like I was talking about playing with a dog, in order to continue doing that, you need to learn the responsibility. So until then, that's taken away. If the benefit of driving and getting your license means that you can drive to school, you can go out with your friends, but you're only allowed to have, one in the car, and that's your responsibility to make them safe. And let's say they get a ticket and their friend didn't have their seatbelt on, so now they have another ticket. Well, okay, I know that you still need to get from point A to point B, but nothing fun. It's just, your vehicle's a tool right now until I feel like you're ready for that responsibility again, because it's my job to keep you safe. So how long do you think that should be? And what are the steps that we need to know how, if you're ready for that responsibility again? So as they're older, to give them less chance to defy you through that, because it is a fine line, you let them help process through that. And I think that's a really strong relationship building thing, and you're still doing your job as a parent, and you're allowing them to participate and make some grown-up decisions and set those repercussions for themselves a little bit, and some accountability to hold themselves to that. They need to be firm and in a kind manner. We are teaching our kids, we're guiding our kids, we are not dictating to our kids. Even though we still want them to do what we've said, we are allowing them their brain to figure that out. And like I said, giving your child a choice if you can. When they're younger, that's really how you lay it out there for them. You could do this or this. If you continue this, comes in my hands and I have to do this, because that's my job. And unfortunately, that means you might not get to see your toy or your phone or whatever. So coaching your child is really important, because whenever this is happening, we're building trust with them and dialogue. And a 4-year-old's gonna throw tantrums and misbehavior, so you might have to let that settle a little bit before you can talk with them. Giving kids, before you set a consequence, it's okay to let it stew a little bit, especially as these misbehaviors are more dangerous and there is more responsibility in the hands of kids as we let them have independence and things. So they can have the natural consequences of having to wait for you to decide what their logical consequences are. It's kind of good for people to feel that. I know, how many of you have turned something in late and worried about what your grade was going to be, or if anybody got that, or you ran a red light and you're like, oh no, did anybody see that? Sped and no, you shouldn't have, or as soon as those lights go off, you're like, oh no, what did I do in the car? That helps keep us in check as a society, so that's okay. So your job is to coach them and to be there for them and be a supportive, calming role, and it's their job to make good choices. So until they can, it's their job to learn how to make good choices. And having decision-making skills is what makes them good humans. It's what puts them in responsible community members in our society as, they grow into adulthood. And so setting these baselines at a young age is really important. And trying to create the minimal damage you can on your relationship with your child and your own sanity. So finding ways to do that is really important. Some kids are just really easygoing, want to please the parents all the time. Some think they've done everything they should have and everything they do should please you because they're amazing and wonderful and they know everything. All different personalities, and it's a beautiful thing to watch whichever child you have or mix, or you know, whatever kind of traits your kids are displaying and you're helping navigate that. Like, that's amazing, and it's such a huge honor to be able to do that. But again, we need to save our sanity and we want to enjoy that. So finding ways to do that. So I hope understanding a little bit about natural consequences and logical consequences helps you. I strongly recommend you reading about it. I did my research out of the University of Minnesota, and then I'm reading Love and Logic, Parenting with Love and Logic right now. And that's what spurred me into this. And there's so many good tools. And again, whenever you're reading stuff, take what you can from it. Not every method, you know, has some stuff that you might not agree with or you might not like. But you can like alter it to fit you. And just think on it, marinate on it a little bit, and I really think you'll find it useful. So, thanks for joining us. That's all I have for today. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. That way you can get new updates. We will be posting some new things that I have coming aside from our parenting videos. We will have some stuff with reading on there as we build our family resource library. And so stay tuned for more information on that. And I wish you all a great day, a happy weekend, and happy parenting.